Just to introduce myself, yeah, Matt Ball. I've been in the kind of tech and e-commerce and associated markets for about 20 years, and at Channel Creator, I work on all of the GTM side of things. So I put together the strategies and the approaches to the market across the whole of Europe, and sometimes further afield into EMEA and Asia Pacific, depending on the clients we're working with. And as you will have noticed, I am not German. So just to give my credentials for how I'm going to be speaking on this session, I've worked with German software companies throughout my career. So my first two jobs, first 7 years of my career, with German software companies, and now I work with companies that are selling into the Central European market, into DACH, and work with companies like O2 Telefonica Germany and a number of other large German organizations. So I've got domain expertise and geographical expertise, but nowhere near as much as my two colleagues who are on the call. So I'm going to ask Bernhard to do a quick introduction of himself, just in terms of just expanding a little bit on what Eric was saying. Do the same for Elias, and then we'll move into the rest of the content. So Bernhard, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. And again, thank you for having us on this event tonight. My name is Bernhard Marbach, and I'm the oldest in this team. I have a, let's say, background in sales for roughly 35 years. I have a degree in computer science and international business from a German university, and worked all my life mainly in Germany, but ran teams in North America and Canada. For example, in the media area, we sold a solution to the Toronto Sun, Edmonton Sun, Calgary Sun, Ottawa Sun, the editorial system in the late 80s already. So I headed up teams for the last 30 years from 200 to 300 people in different areas like media, e-commerce, fintech, mobile advertising, IoT, AI data solutions, Fan AI, maybe someone has heard of it. And right now I'm a partner and channel creator since almost 14 years, covering markets outside of the UK and in the UK. As said, I'm based in Hamburg, Germany, and therefore covering the German speaking markets. I myself was partner in 4 different startups as well. One in the Next hardware and software. Next, it's obviously you might know that since you're from Canada, it's the company of Steve Jobs, who personally hired me, but that 30 years ago. Then in mobile advertising, and which was Smarto, a global network. We serve roughly 8 billion ads a day, which we have sold 3 years ago to a Singaporean company, then Channel Creator, and I'm still a partner in Fan AI, an artificial intelligence, fan data, and online gaming platform. That's my background, but still living in Germany, always lived in Germany, just spent lots of time abroad.
Thanks, Bernhard. And hi, everyone. Thanks for having us as well. As Erica said, I'm a Canadian transplant. In fact, I did my engineering degree at Waterloo, and my mother's German. My name doesn't sound German, so it's a bit misleading. But I was sent across to Europe by a Boston-based company called PictureTel, which was one of the early video conferencing platforms, for the simple reason that I spoke German and French. They just needed someone to help, I guess, bridge the gap between the US and the European offices, and that sort of started me on this journey of representing and working with North American, primarily tech startups, and getting them traction in Europe, and also starting to understand the big differences in each of the markets, both culturally and from a likelihood of success depending on the stage of your growth. The last 15 years, primarily though within e-commerce, and before I met Matt and team. So Channel Creator is 13 years old. Before I met Matt and team or joined Channel Creator, Matt actually tried to sell one of his German software company propositions into the company I was working for, and that's how we started working together, and have done a number of different contracts within just specifically e-commerce. So fintech, buy now, pay later side of it. One of our last projects was with a Montreal-based company called Heyday, which was acquired by a Vancouver company, Hootsuite, which I'm sure you all know very well, as they were expanding into the European market. So anyway, without going into more detail, I think maybe let's get started. Most of the, I think, practical advice is just from anecdotes rather than spending a lot of time on formal definitions.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Elias. So in terms of what we're going to cover, obviously Central Europe is a really interesting market. Germany is a really interesting market. So we're going to start by looking at why Germany is, how Germany is different, some of the stats and figures and shape and size of the market to give you a sense of it, and why people get so excited about it. And also, naturally, it's a good launch pad in order to get into other European markets, but it's not without its challenges because of the localization considerations and the expectation of kind of German language skills within the business. So I want to talk a little bit about what it looks like, why it's different, and what you might expect to see when you land in Germany. We want to talk about what you do and don't need. So there are some things that I think are, let's say, expectations that people have, which are actually not really necessary when you're starting up in the market, and people overcook it in terms of what is expected and what you have to have in place before you get moving. We want to talk a little bit about the importance of channel, because there is a real kind of need for local ecosystem, and Bernard's got some great insights about that. And then looking at where you should go from Germany, so how it's going to help you prepare, and why it's going to be a good launch pad. If you can get Germany right, Europe is your oyster, so the saying goes. And then finally, we want to talk a little bit about regulations as one of the kind of key challenges that makes Europe, and in particular Germany, quite challenging. So how you can prepare for that if you're thinking of trying to tackle the German market and surrounding markets. And then we're going to wrap up with some Q&A, and just take any questions around thoughts you might have and how you might be able to take your first steps into the market. So going on to the first slide, I'm going to hand over to Bernard, and he can talk a little bit about the shape and size of the market.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. Thanks for the introduction and the agenda. It's, I guess, some of the figures everybody knows already. Germany is the #1 in Europe in terms of business and population. We have roughly 2.5 million enterprises, not counting SOHOs. So there are millions and millions of more. Germany is well known for thousands and millions of small, very small SME companies, and obviously quite big ones as well. Definitely #1 in Europe here. Population is compared to Canada, extremely big. If you see the size of the country in terms of square kilometers, it's just a small part of Canada, but still has population of 82.5 million. So massive, massive business opportunities there. The numbers of workers is roughly half of it, bit more than half of it, so 43.5 million, and extremely low unemployment rate over the last 10 years. So it's extremely, let's say, successful in the last couple of years. Consumer spend 2022, if you see that, that's let's say 43 billion euros, which obviously is massive. And it's a very large consumer market in Europe. Compared to the UK, it's the only area, I guess, where the UK is bigger. It's in terms of retail, because that's what the UK is known for. But the largest consumer market in total is definitely Germany in Europe. Highest GDP in Europe, I guess that's you can read that as well. And what is very important, although we are in terms of square kilometers, a very small country, largest national economy in Europe, but #4 globally. And I guess that's because of the very, let's say, successful verticals. I would even say automotive #1, then manufacturing, energy, healthcare. And in terms of startups, technical startups, IT startups, in the last year, I guess even Berlin was the first time ever bigger than London. I guess I just read it today, so we don't have it in here, but I saw that it's Berlin has overtaken London for the first time. Although London as a city is quite definitely 10 times bigger than Berlin. But maybe one additional thing to say about the structure of Germany, which I come back to later on as well. It's wherever you go in Germany, you're at the wrong place and you're at the right place. Because you can go to Berlin, it's the capital, the biggest city, then second one is Hamburg, but then you have Munich, Frankfurt, you have the Düsseldorf Cologne area, and each area has its strong verticals. If you're gonna want to do finance, you have to go to Frankfurt. If all government related IT startups, it's Berlin. Everything trading, international trade is Hamburg. If you want to go to automotive, you go to Stuttgart and München. And media, Hamburg as well. And big IT companies, not IT startups, is the southern part of Germany. So wherever you are at the right place, but you're at the wrong place as well. You either have to travel or you have, let's say, good communication habits to cover the whole of German market.
Very good. Thanks so much, Bernard. So we'll move on from that. And again, we've got plenty of time later on for the questions. So this one I'm going to hand over to Elias to just make a few comments around, again, the differences in culture you're going to see when you're entering the German market vis-a-vis the kind of working in the North American market.
Matt, I'm happy for you to put all the bullets up, and I'll sort of walk my way around it. But I think, you know, I guess there are a lot of stereotypes about Germany, and you know, stereotypes exist for a reason, because in many cases they are based on some kind of reality, and the German stereotypes are absolutely 100% there. In the sense of from a cultural standpoint, and I'm sort of going to jump around a little bit. But things like perfectionism, punctuality, you know, doing things in a very analytical way, and that's sort of, you know, there's a conservatism there as well. Those are 100% there, and that sort of permeates the office or the sort of the work situation, which has been changing with a lot of the tech startups, a lot of the startups that have you know, been created in Germany, because suddenly you've got, and I noticed this especially selling into some of the pure play retail startups, was that the worker base was from all across Europe, so English became the lingua franca, and as a result, some of those other European cultural norms were sort of all mixed together, and that's, you know, what makes Berlin such an exciting place. But fundamentally, it is still very much true to its stereotypes, and that sort of makes it challenging to come into the market from the outside and be seen as sort of, I get this idea that a larger German organization might just take a chance on some innovative, clever new software or solutions or set of services coming in from the outside. Something you see very frequently in the North American market absolutely does not work in Germany. And so in that regard, looking and sounding and seeming more German actually confers a much higher sort of set of advantages than maybe you'd think at first. So, you know, and German UIs is a really interesting one, because a lot of software solutions have an English language UI, and most people say, you know what, we can deal with it, or we can manage with it. But actually, that is one of the many localizations that will make a massive difference to a lot of the German client base of customers, especially if they are the larger, more entrenched from traditional vertical industries, manufacturing, automotive, and so on. I think Bernhard, you know, has a wonderful anecdote about relationships and the importance of local representatives, and I'll hand over to him for that in a second. When I was selling into retail, into German retailers, one of the largest clients of one of our customers was Adidas. Now, Adidas really is it's an international company. So English was the language. The people I dealt with were Indian, Portuguese, North American. In that regard, the relationships ended up being direct between ourselves and them. When I then tried to sell into the equivalent of, I guess, what would be a good, I'm trying to, Holt Renfrew in Canada, sort of a high-end retailer for fashion called Peek & Cloppenburg, I found out that although we were being invited into to present the product and be part of a selection process, actually there was a local IT consultant who had already been working them for many, many years, had lots of relationships with some of the better software platforms. And we never really had an opportunity. We never had a chance there because we had never taken the time to look for those influencers in the German market who worked in retail specifically, for example. I don't know, if Bernhard, if you want to talk about the your selling, your relationship selling in the German bars and pubs, but I think probably a good time to jump in with that.
Yeah, I can do it now or later, it doesn't matter, but it's a very, very interesting thing. It's a couple of years ago that Sage KHK was the #1 ERP system in the SME market. They had roughly 3 million customers in the German market only. So lots and lots of Sohos. And once on the Hannover Messe, which is one of the biggest fairs in Germany, I met the VP sales and asked him, okay, how are you selling this stuff? Who's your best sales guy? Who's your best partner? And he said, do you know what? Our absolutely best channel is the local pub in every small city. When the MDs of small companies sit together, have a beer on Friday night, they ask each other, what are you using? And he said, okay, if he just pays 1 out of 100 pubs a couple of beers, if they say, okay, we are using Sage KHK because of this or that reason, and it works, next week they sell more. And he says this was the #1. And obviously they had implementation partners all over Germany. I don't know how many hundreds, but hundreds of small implementation partners to do the implementation of the former KHK, which was then taken over by Sage. So Sage KHK, it's local partners, and they said German-speaking direct recommendation. That was their best channel. It was funny to hear for me because it was roughly 30 years ago. But if you see nowadays, who's the #1 ERP provider in Germany now? It's SAP. 20 years ago, when they started with SAP Business One for the SME market, everybody said, okay, this is too expensive, this is too big, you will never succeed. But they had a clearly defined strategy, clearly defined target market, and they started to build a channel of hundreds of partners in Germany, and now they are the #1 in the German market. German software, German speaking, German references, and a full sales channel, even though SAP is huge in Germany, tens of thousands of employees, they do implementation and sales via partners completely.
Thanks, Bernhard. So the two sort of other final bullets, and I think I should start moving on, Matt, because we'll run out of time with all our content to get to the Q&A. The competitive side is also interesting because the German market, and we see this quite a bit, is really innovative and good companies and solutions often stop off or within Europe are building up their market presence in Europe before they start moving over to North America. So a lot of people that we've worked with from North America coming over are then surprised to see that there's a very strong local competitor. Well, guess what? This is a highly innovative and competitive market. And so companies coming from India, from Israel, often come here first and then make their way over. I think more to Bernhard's point, I find the German market is sort of in between the UK, Benelux, the Nordics, where the direct selling and not necessarily having a local partner is that important. It's in between that and Southern Europe, Italy, Spain, Portugal, where without a local partner, forget it. Germany is somewhere in the middle, but you are going to accelerate your presence and your likelihood of success with local influences and partners, much more so than the UK, Benelux, and Nordics. I think I'll leave it at that, Matt, and let's...
Great stuff. Thanks, Elias. Thanks, Bernard. And yeah, let's jump into next what it is that you really need to consider. And for those of you that attended the UK session last year, it's a similar picture. So I don't think there'll be any surprises on here if you've seen the previous session that we did. It starts with a local resource. So I think in the UK, there's quite a kind of well-trodden path of people flying over. But of course, at the moment, flyover resources are very restricted for obvious reasons. So, but in Germany, a local resource, someone who speaks the language and often operates in that local market hub Bernard mentioned earlier on. So if you're in media, you might want to be based in Hamburg, for example. If you're in finance, you're going to want somebody based out of Frankfurt. And having someone on the ground who speaks the lingo and can also do that, the meeting and greeting as and when that's appropriate. We really do think that's an essential part of what you would need to put together to land in the German market. Without it, you're really going to be bouncing off, and it's just going to, the challenges of time zone plus localization are going to be insurmountable. Another element of it is the strategy. So defining your ideal customer for Germany, it's going to look very different to your ideal customer in Canada or in North America more broadly. Because the shape and size of the organizations and how they're built out. You know, Germany's famous for the Mittelstand and the fact it's got a very strong mid-market presence. The Mittelstand actually is in a kind of process of being dragged into the new millennium, and it has many challenges. But these mid-sized companies carry a lot of local resources. They're often very kind of locally focused. They want people to come and see them, and as a result, maybe some of them are struggling with things like digital transformation. But understanding how that looks and having a local person who can put that strategy together and understand what the market really looks like and who you should be targeting with your proposition is really important. And then this is something that we say across the board when you're entering European market or any other market, is think about the resources that you need to support those people on the ground. So you're going to need to think about who your solution architects or your sales engineers or technical support people are going to be to support the German market, to make sure you've got enough bandwidth in your organization, because you don't want to land and have a conversation with a significant customer and then you just haven't got the bandwidth from your team to bring the best people to the table to close it, because you are going to need the absolute best people to close these deals with larger German organizations. They're going to need to see the wow factor. And so you need to kind of have your A team on that internationalization project. So you need to think about having some executive coverage. You need to think about having your best sales engineer, your best support people, your best consultants to support your direct sales activities and also support partners who are interested in taking your proposition on and selling it into their customer base. So absolutely think about that from day one and make sure you have those people lined up. The next thing that we talk about is what you can definitely do without having in the first instance. And I think let's roll the first two into one, which is an office and a legal entity. So in Germany, there are a couple of legal structures. One is the GmbH and another is the GBR. And then if you're going large, you have an AG. So the GBR, if you're in the UK, you have a limited, and a limited is a limited, and it's respected, and people see it as a serious business. In Germany, people don't see a GBR as being a serious business, so you need to set up as a GmbH, and there are quite a few hurdles that you have to leap through in order to get that legal entity. And frankly, you don't need to do that on day one. So German companies will look at the solution, and if it's the right fit and they're the right size of business, and you've done your kind of strategy right, you should be able to close business between your Canadian HQ on your Canadian paper and the German business. And again, you know, do you need an office? I would say even less so now in the kind of in the times of post-COVID, but even pre-COVID, the need for an office is not really there, because people expect, you know, SaaS and technology and other vendors to come and see them at their offices. And as long as you have that kind of local presence, the local language skills, and a person who's really credible, boardroom sales representative who's able to deliver the message, you don't really need that office, that entity. And it plays back to something Bernard said earlier on, which is, which city are you going to set up in? And where is the best place to locate your office, and you're going to learn that as part of your initial go-to-market. And you can decide that 6, 12, 18 months into your market engagement, where you know where you should be based and why. So don't jump in too early with that stuff. The final thing is a lot of people put a GM in market. So they'll land a GM in market, possibly in the wrong city, ironically, and then they'll also bring on a kind of admin marketing lead to help that person. And you end up with this cost base of like 300 or 400K a year of a very expensive GM who's not necessarily given to pure sales, and then they want additional support. And then you have a marketing lead, and that marketing lead can't fill all of their time with marketing activities, so they end up doing administration, which they're not that great at. So often, you know, there is a kind of misnomer of having this GM and a kind of assistant and a marketeer, and really that's not a great fit in the first instance. What you need is you need to get very, very focused sales activity, win your first customers, and then build out your team so you can do a lot of what you need to do with an individual surrounded by the right marketing services from agencies and from outsourced offerings and such like. So we think, you know, these are the things you really don't need to do when you're entering the market. Then if we talk about what's up for discussion, it's customers are willing to buy off a USD or a Canadian dollar price list, more a USD price list, so they kind of get it and they understand the currency FX and such like better. But putting together a euro price list and kind of hanging your hat on those prices gives customers a little bit more of a sense of confidence, which is, I know that that's my price and it's not going to fluctuate, and that my vendor in Canada is going to wear those currency fluctuations. It gives that sense that, you know, you're here to stay and you're in it for the long haul, and you're tying your flag to the kind of euro mast, if you like. So it is a good thing. It's a good indicator that you're serious and you're not just kind of having a go, like giving the market a punt, and you might be gone next year. So putting a euro price list in, we would recommend it. It's not absolutely essential, but it's a good practice. Another thing that we're going to come on to is the importance of partners. We've already talked a little bit about it, but putting together a partner program, if you don't have one and you've been selling direct in North America, think about maybe 2 or 3 types of partner. It might be implementers that you want to help with consulting and support. It might be referrers who are going to be kind of local people with local knowledge. For example, with one product, we went in through ISO consultants, and those ISO consultants are massively respected in the German manufacturing industry. So having an ISO consultant saying, hey, this piece of software is worth a look because it's going to help you to adhere to your responsibilities under the newer ISO accreditation program. Think about that kind of thing, and think about building a partner program which is going to enable you to engage and build relationships, foster the relationships of trust with those local endorsers, and it will pay back in the kind of 12 to 18 month time frame. And then another thing, you know, I personally find events in the kind of sense of the big trade shows are often quite difficult to make a dent in. So, you know, if you go to somewhere like Hannover Messe and you go to one of the big shows like CeBIT or something, or DMEXCO or similar, they are huge, sprawling events, and you've got attendees all over Europe, people flying in from everywhere. And it's really, really difficult to make an impact at those events. So if you're thinking about events, think about much, much smaller curated events. And you know, for Germany, but for other parts of Europe, think about roundtables, think about you kind of lunch and learns and things like that. Those are much more effective for companies coming into the market than the big trade shows, where you tend to just kind of, you won't make a dent, you won't make an impact, and your brand will be lost among all the massive
because you might
players.
only have one table somewhere in the back, nobody recognizes you. So you're, let's say, one of the smallest on that shows. So it doesn't make sense in the beginning.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, some of the trade shows and the showgrounds in Germany are amongst the biggest in Europe, and you know, some of the biggest in the world. So they are seriously impressive, but also seriously difficult to crack unless you land with a spaceship with your brand on it. So just in terms of going back to channel, again, we've talked about it quite a bit, so I don't want to dwell too much on these points, but direct sales is obviously, I think it's very much the norm in the North American market. And I think the business decision makers are very open to receiving direct sales and considering them. And what we see is that in Europe, the people that are most open to direct approaches are often the people who've gone and run a business or managed a business unit in America and then come back. They've been to Canada, they've been to the US, they come back and then they have this kind of open-mindedness to every 1, every 2, every 3 cold approaches out of 10. I'll have a look and I'll see what they're talking about, and I'll kind of keep an open mind. And I think there is less of that open mind. It needs to be heard in Germany, I think a little bit more than the UK as well. It needs to be heard from multiple angles. And so if a partner decides they're going to block you, it's game over. That partner is going to say, I definitely wouldn't endorse this solution. And here's the one that we would endorse. And actually it's a German solution. And, kind of so it's from the home turf and you can meet the founder and those kind of things go a long way. So doing extra work around building out your partner offering and building out the local points of endorsement and advocacy is super important. And again, it's because of and it's changing in the startup market, it's changing in the fintech market. So to Elias's points earlier on, the culture is changing in that startup scene. But when you speak to German startups, they always complain of the conservatism of the mid-market and the corporates in the German market, and the fact that it's too easy to buy the big one and buy the incumbent, buy the SAP, buy the Salesforce. So think about how you can use the ecosystems of those companies. And we do something called an ecosystem hijack quite frequently, where you look at all SAP's partners, you look at all Salesforce's partners or similar. They will have really, really robust and mature ecosystems. And one thing you can do is go and offer your solution to and through those partners. And those partners are always looking for innovative things to do. If they can sound different because they're not offering SAP and they're not offering Salesforce, they're offering something fresh and new, it can be a real boost to the level of interest, the level of differentiation. And if they are rubber stamping it and saying, no, we've looked at this solution, it's hot Canadian technology, it's already big in that market, and we think it's going to be ideal for the German market, that goes a really long way to helping you to win those deals. So it really is worth investing there. We have talked here about the KHK example, so we won't do the pub example again, but I thought maybe Bernard, you want to just say a few words about ecosystems that you've built for companies like Intershop in the past.
Yeah, maybe different ones. One was, we did a, let's say, call management and call tracking, call routing system called WhatWorks, which was, let's say, the opposite, since we as Channel Creator helped the UK-based company to come into the German market. And due to a lot of good relationships, we came across the #1 in the used mobile market, which is the Auto Scout group. The Scout group is Auto Scout, Mobile Scout, and so they're selling private equities, and they sell cars the same as eBay does, or mobile. And we came, let's say, to the final end without German material, by just speaking German, but we finally lost because at the end, they didn't trust these companies, this company too much in terms of giving support in German. And there was a local company, a German company called Martelso. They were 20 years in market, had local relationships, they were there themselves, they had implementation partners, and they were serving this into the German market with hundreds of customers. And even though some of the big clients thought we had a better solution with WhatWorks, they still made the decision for Martelso because of the reason: local company, local support, local partners. Technology might be a bit older, but at the end, this was the final decision. I had a lot of discussions with eBay, and they said, okay, we simply can't make a decision for a UK-based company with just one man on the ground in Germany. That's simply the way it is, and that was the main reason. And we didn't start to build up a channel or to build up local support, and therefore we simply lost those deals. It was a good learning, but at the end it was a question of a budget as well. They wanted to come into the market just quickly, speak to customers without building a channel, without doing all the preparation that needed to be done. And it's a good example of, yes, you can get into the market, but you have to do your homework first and make sure that you support all the initiatives with a, let's say, strong background as well.
Thanks, Bernard. One more comment on this slide, which is on the right-hand side, you'll see this target. And this is something we do with quite a lot of our customers to work out where they need to focus. And we usually find the best place to start is with strategy and digital consultancies, which we have up in this kind of top left quadrant here. And also trying to find new and existing projects through system integrators and trying to get into those players that already have the projects underway. And maybe they want to flip that project from what the tired and boring stuff they're doing to something fresh and new and exciting and international. And you'll find, you know, maybe 1 in 10, 2 in 10, 3 in 10 of those partners, you know, maybe they're falling out with their incumbent, maybe they need something new because everybody's saying the same thing in the market. That's where we recommend that you would start in the German market, because that's where you can get some traction. And that's where you might be able to turn around some of these scenarios like Bernard just described. What we always leave till later is thought leaders and influencers and like I say, technology partners, because they tend to take longer to percolate and they're more complex in terms of integrations and such like. So we would really start in those top 2 segments there and then work our way out and bring those other elements to bear in the second.
Yeah.
And
as soon as you've got the first references, you can go to the thought leaders as well. But before that, I guess it simply doesn't make sense and it's too expensive in the beginning.
Yeah. So moving on here, in terms of some of the steps that we take, we've got some blogs around this, so I won't go into huge detail here. We'll very happily take some questions on it afterwards. But one thing that we do find works quite well is when you've defined your partner segments, try and create a target list of no more than maybe 50 or 60 companies that you want to go after, because it will help to kind of laser focus your content, your outreach model, and the information and the resources that you need to support a channel build. So what we always try and do is be really, really hyper focused on the partners that are serving our ideal customer profile. So effectively selecting your targets and doing your ideal customer profile work, then doing your ideal partner profile. Who is the ideal partner? What are they currently using? What products do they hold in their portfolio? What kind of client relationships do they have? What are their responsibilities in that? Are they going to deliver local support, consulting, etc.? And it really allows you to whittle down that audience. And that's what results in successful partnerships and also not too many broken eggs in the process. But what we always look for is we try and find of an audience of 50 partners, we try and find the 5 that have a project that fits the specification of the client we're working with. So have a mind of, you're always looking for those companies that say, I was speaking to my customer about this last week, we have 2 things that we could pitch to them. Give me your best proposal and offer, and maybe we can take that to our customer. That's what you're looking for in one of these channel builds. And once you've done that, you know, I'll give you an example of the work that we've done with Intershop when we helped them to re-enter new markets in the kind of 2010 to 2013 era. What we did with them is to take them into one of the departments of Accenture Strategy, and that division of Accenture Strategy then effectively trained all of their consultants, all of their developers, all of their support staff. And once they've got all of those people trained on the first project, they then felt this need to drive new engagement with new customers and sell across the rest of their base. So we did this enablement process by bringing a large project to the table in that particular case, implementing that and training up all of their teams on the job. And then their marketing and sales team stepped in and said, this was a great project, great reference, we want to replicate it. How can we do that? And then they started to build out a go-to-market plan with us around that. So what you're really looking for with these local partners is you want to get in so deep that you're part of their DNA, and then they become your kind of German local delivery force. So you want the consultants, the developers, the support staff, all fully conversant with your technology. And that's how you're going to continue to drive more performance with those partners, and then run a GTM with them, run a kind of 12-month, 24-month go-to-market and really drive that engagement. So the last few points that we wanted to go through today, really to summarize, how does Germany help you prepare for European expansion? The first one is culturally, it's a tough market. And once you've cracked Germany, it really enables you to understand the elements that you're going to need in order to move into the adjacent markets. So Benelux, going to Nordics, jumping backwards over to UK and Ireland if you're going Germany first. Once you've got it nailed in Germany, there's a really, really good kind of basis on which to build your business out into those adjacent markets.
It takes a bit of time to get the trust of, let's say, the German managers, but it's really hard to lose it again. If you once have the trust and you have lots of references and you are in market, you really have to do something dramatically wrong to lose it again. So once you're in there, just make sure that you, let's say, don't do the wrong things in the market, don't oversell, and don't try to, let's say, grow too quickly sometimes. Just be a bit conservative and grow with your customers and with the market, and then you can be successful. And as said, since it's so hard to enter the market, it's sometimes even harder to get out of it again, because once you won your customers, they stick to you.
Thanks, Bernard. The second point around competition, as Bernard stated earlier on, there is a huge amount of local talent and a lot of German startups that are really starting to kind of take over in the European market. So be prepared for that competition when you land in Germany. It really is fierce, and you've got great companies growing up through programs like PwC Scale that are driving significant growth, and they're taking they have access to finance, and they're good at fundraising, and so there's some real serious players in the market. So do a little bit of pre-work on your competition, and then once you're in the market in Germany, then you're going to see those same players across the rest of Europe. So a lot of the local German players will have an internationalization strategy. So once you're embedded in Germany, you're going to see the similar picture across the rest of Europe. The other place where you'll see a real hotbed of competition that may be a little bit different to Germany is in the UK market, but it does give you a really, really good grounding. Once you've landed in Germany, you're going to see most of the same folks as you move across the rest of the market. In terms of channel, I don't think we need to go into that any more detail, but political, complex, there is that conservatism. So get your advocates lined up and make sure you start with a mindset of how you're going to build that ecosystem. Otherwise, you'll lose deals later, and you'll regret not having those local points of advocacy and recommendation. And also think about Austria and Switzerland. Most large-scale technology companies will work across DACH, so Germany, Austria, Switzerland. And if you're going to do Germany, why not do Austria and Switzerland? Because there may be companies that really fit your customer profile. You can do the business in German language, and it is a real kind of classic technology company play to land in those three markets in one go. So probably when you're approaching Germany, just think about stretching it a little bit wider. You'll get access to an additional audience of customers, and then in some cases, some of the German startups have just stayed in Germany or their area of Germany. You might be able to leapfrog them by jumping into Austria or Switzerland or similar. We're going to finish up now by talking a little bit about regulations, which are painful but necessary, I guess I would say. And maybe Bernard, you can just kind of provide a few thoughts on what we've seen when we've been working in the German market with regard to how it's regulated.
Yeah, maybe you can just show the rest of the slide as well. It's at the end, GDPR is GDPR. It's the same in Germany, but there are lots of additional rules. And I do have always have one very good or a couple of very good examples. One is in the financial market, where you have the BaFin, which controls banking and other local regulations, and they must be observed, and it's German specific. And once we sold to Deutsche Telekom in Austria, and for a North American company, and I personally at that time presented a contract to Deutsche Telekom Austria. It was 35 pages, a small one just for, let's say, hosting emails and SME e-commerce shops, 35 pages. A week later, I got the changes. It was 350 pages of changes and additions. Everything had to follow the Deutsches Telekommunikationsgesetz, which is the German telecommunication law. I guess that's the right translation. And it took us 3 months just to discuss safe harbor concepts and any kind of data structures, regulations. So just think about it, a 35 pages contract, a legal document came back 350 pages. Be prepared and make sure that you cover this and have resources to cover this as well, because this might be a deal breaker sometime later on. And one other thing, which is everybody knows about the Nord Stream 2, it has been stopped now just because of some local German requirements. The Nord Stream 2 has a Swiss company, started a Swiss company to run the pipeline, but it's not accepted. It has to be a German-based company under German law. Not even Swiss-based under EU law works, and not even the, let's say, the owners of Nord Stream 2 knew that. So the whole pipeline project now, the certification project was stopped, maybe even for a couple of months, nobody knows, until this has been solved. So it's not only for small ones, even for these kind of very big projects, this might happen.
And actually, one very, randomly small, silly example, and it's one that come across everyone. The U.S. software company I worked with insisted on, having California as the, MNDA location. The German retailers said, no, it's got to be Germany. And then when we didn't change it, they just threw us out of the whole tender process. So, and that's just those simple ones are, you should not be tripping up over things like that. The flexibility for that is just, no problem, we'll deal with it, and then save the fights for the really significant, meaningful negotiations, and don't lose goodwill at the early stages, which is what happened there.
Yeah, indeed. So one final comment is we live in this blue box over here. So one of the things we do recommend you think about is how can you land in a new market without hiring in the wrong place, the wrong person with the wrong resources, all that kind of stuff. So obviously the long-term objective will always be to hire a local team, but there are many, many options in the European market, and particularly in the German market, because it's such a strong market, for outsourcing your sales, outsourcing your marketing functions. And, we are one of many companies that offer those kinds of services. So do think about the flexibility of having a model that enables you to scout in markets across the DACH market, as an example, and test those hypotheses you've got, and also test some of the complexities. You might think, okay, we're ready for the regulatory piece, we're ready with the localization piece, but before you land your GmbH on the ground and have your GM in market, think about how you're going to approach it, whether you're going to bring your first customers on board and try and get your first revenues in place with all of the necessary stuff before you then invest in your GmbH, which is going to cost in the kind of low tens of thousands of euros to set up when you've kind of taken into account legal costs and other such things. So something worth thinking about. So we've got a model of clinics. If anyone wants to look at how you might enter the German market, then we have a link here which can be distributed as part of the follow-on to this session. But what we'd like to do now is we'd like to open up for Q&A. I'm going to moderate, and then I'm going to ask Elias and Bernhard to respond to each of the questions. So I'll stop sharing my screen now, and then I'm going to pick up on the chat any questions that are coming in, and then we can go from there. Okay, so looking at the first question, what is the main advice you would give to BC tech companies who want to get their products and services into Germany? So what's the number one thing that you would say when you're first considering it? So if I can ask you to comment on that one first.
Maybe I just get started and then you follow up. So number one, obviously, whom do you want to sell it to? Is it ready for the German market? And how do you want to sell it to? And how will it be served to the client? Just very simple.
Yeah, I think, before, if you don't have product market fit and some good references in your home market, you're not ready. Just, don't think that'll be the sort of the easy way to find new markets. I think you need to be absolutely solid there. And to Bernhard's point previously, a lot of good homework, just take the time. And I think what Matt's, part earlier, there will be some good local outsourcing that you can just get a lot of good advice from. Even the sessions we run for an hour to talk to us, and we're more than happy to give you that advice and to talk through some things. And then if you're not ready, maybe in 2 years you will be ready. So we're working with some PwC scale-up companies that I think Matt first met 3 years ago, and they're now ready, and that's fine. Take your time.
Thanks, guys. So the next question: when would you start in Germany versus the UK if you wanted to start an expansion into the UK? So what order would you do it in, and where does Germany fit in that kind of priority list of markets to nail down?
I mean, my take on that is it's a vertical thing. If you, let's say you're in retail tech, the UK is by far that's where retail, online retail especially, is just booming and is very innovative. If it's automotive, for example, Germany is a no-brainer. I mean, if you look at it from that standpoint, the other aspect which maybe is a consideration is, if you're in an industry that is highly regulated in different markets, Europe, the EU, the UK is now out of the EU from that standpoint, and it's a bit uncertain as to how that will look. So Germany might be more from a ease of trading standpoint, a better starting point, and then use that to expand.
Yeah, and as Elias said, it depends on the vertical, depends on your existing clients. Do you have existing clients that might have relationships or subsidiaries in either Germany or the UK, or give you an easy access just to, let's say, test out the first couple of clients and go to that market where you might have better relationships in the beginning? But please just keep in mind, Germany, in addition, you have to cover the localization, which you don't have to do in the UK. That's why obviously a lot of US or Canadian companies come to the UK first. Until last year, it was the hub into the EU. It's now a hub into Europe, but no longer, let's say, ideally to a hub into the EU. But therefore it's a bit harder to make a decision now.
Yeah. If I ask the next, we've got an interesting question here, which is, if your tech is being sold direct to consumer, so B2C, does the mentality around influencers and partners still stand true?
Yeah. What kind of, I'm thinking now, are you thinking of influencers, partners as in social media influencers, or is this sort of, because we're not a very B2C bunch of guys, we're much more B2B software sales, but if you could maybe just clarify a little bit mobile gaming.
Yeah, mobile gaming.
All right. I would say then all bets are off in terms of what we've just said. It's, you've got the ability to work directly.
Maybe I can have a go at that one, Elias, which is a kind of thing from our PwC playbook, which is local partners are really good for a kind of associating your proposition within a B2C world, and then finding groups and audiences, pre-existing audiences of local consumers. So I would say one thing you can do is, if you associate your brand through a white label or through a co-brand or through some sort of affiliate offering in that way, you can gain a huge amount of respect from the consumer by being associated with a recognized German technology platform or brand or similar. So I think, it's a different kind of thing. It's not exactly what we were talking about, but having that brand association with a strong German brand, I really feel it can get you a long way, and you can kind of land in a consumer audience and really try and get some traction that way.
Unless you're as big as Sony or Apple or whoever in that market. So
and then just go direct. Exactly.
Exactly.
Precisely. I think that's the last question, guys, because we've come to the end of our time.